Hey everybody, welcome back. This is Pete from MyJewelryBunch.com, and today we're going to cover how to make your own automatic watch, your own custom watch from parts that you can purchase on eBay or anywhere else on the web that you tend to find them. And I'm going to cover basically where to find these and the assembly procedures that you're going to use to put everything together. Now in this example, you can see I'm using the Diver's Silicone Band. I'm using a clone case. I ordered some hands from one of my suppliers. I'm not sure which hands I'm going to use yet, but you'll see as we get along in the video. And I'm actually going to make this for a friend, so I haven't put a logo on the dial yet. So these are all the parts we're going to use. These are the hands that I purchased, and you can see all the parts in the previous section that I have that we're going to be using to assemble our own custom watch. And let's get started with this. Okay, so the first place we're going to go looking is eBay. Now, eBay is still the best place to get watch parts if you want to build your own custom watch. So just keep that in mind. It really is. You can go to wholesalers or distributors online, but you're not going to find movements relatively easy, and you're not going to get the variety from one particular website over another. So eBay is just a general good place to start, and I'm going to, in this case, because I'm using an SW200 movement, I'm actually going to start with that because that's what I know I want to make this watch out of. So I'm going to do SW200 movement. It'll pull up all the movements. Here we go. So we've got the Salida version, which is a Swiss-made version, and then you have the clones, which are probably made in Asia, most likely China, which are just as good. They will all run very well. They're all made pretty much the same because they use the same standards. Now, if we take a look at these two watches here, let's just take a look at this one, for example. This is a genuine Salida movement, and it is chrome. This one's brass. This one is probably a clone at that price. And if we look at on other clones, sometimes you'll find them in brass. So here's one that's brass. I would recommend, it really doesn't matter, but I would recommend getting the steel version because that will typically work better, especially in climates that are very, very hot. So I would probably go for this version. You can see this is, I'm in the United States. This customer, or this seller on eBay, is also selling from the United States. And if you want to filter out where those items are located, come down to location, and if I want to select US only, I'm going to get all the sellers selling out of the US, which means I'll probably get it a little quicker, maybe about a week. So here we go. I've got these particular items here. So if I wanted to pick this one here, and I'm going to do the 2824 clone, I'll pick this movement, add it to my cart, and I'll purchase that. So keep that in mind. Once you know the movement, start there. So we know this is 11.5 Ling. It's going to fit most watch cases. Now we're going to go look for a 2824 watch case. So I'll do 2824 watch case. This is where it gets a little more complicated because now you're going to go look for the case that you want to use. So let's take a look and see what comes up. May not get the variety that you want, especially if you've filtered out by location. And did I do that? No, I've got US only. I'm going to go back to default. That should give me a whole lot more options. Okay, you can see this one's coming from China. And this is a 38 or a 40 millimeter. I'm going to go with the 40 millimeter. I'm just going to kind of narrow this down, go with a different vendor. Let's see what shows up. There we go. These are just 40 millimeters, $33 to $35.10. So let's take a look at this. Now, again, it's going to ship from China. I'm in the United States, so that's going to take about 4 weeks. Just keep that in mind. So now what I want to do is pick out the case that I want to use. Now, I did pick out this black case here in the middle. So if we select that one, where is it? Let's come down here. This is the case I used in this build. It does not have the red dot at the top, but you can see there it's the case I used. So you're just going to select which one you want. Let's see, this would be, where is it? Black ring C. I don't know, black ring. Well, that one's not that bad. Let's see, black ring. What's this one? Well, that one's not bad either. And if you want the magnifier or not, you can select from this vendor. Let's see, case model. Which version do I want? Now we're going to use a 2824 clone, so I'm going to select that particular one. Now what that typically means, guys, is that when you order it for this particular movement, it's going to come with the spacers for that particular movement and probably anything else you need. Well, if you wanted to go with the NH35 or 36 movements, it's probably exactly the same because those movements are about the same size. Very little difference. So either way, you're probably going to be covered. But there's no price difference, so just make sure you select that. Go ahead and hit the buy now if you want that. So now you've got your movement and your case. Now, before we go any further, the next step is to pick the dial that you want. You may already know what color dial you want, but we have to get some specifics. So I always recommend reading the specifics of the watch case because that's going to tell you 9 times out of 10 what you need for the dial fitment. So we'll come down here and we'll look at the case. Case is 40 millimeters. It is 13.5 millimeters thick, and it fits a 28 millimeter to 29.2 millimeter diameter dial. Keep that in mind. Typically on eBay, you're going to find 28.5 millimeter dials for the 40 millimeter cases. So that's important to know. You don't want to pick the wrong dial. So now we've got the 2820 clone, we've got the movement or the case we're going to use, and now let's go look for dials. So I'm going to do 2824 dial, and I don't really care where it comes from. And I'm going to continue to use the white dials. So now it's just a matter of picking the white dial you want. Now we can come over here. We see this particular dial here. This is for a 2824. 3836, a Miyota model, and if we click on these, we can take a look. This particular white dial is more of a dial similar to the Seamaster dial. So if you wanted to go with that, you could go with that. I like the plain front, so let's close this up. And let's come back and take a look at other dial options that we have. 29 millimeter, this would work. So we've got 29 millimeter, and we've got, these are labeled Bligger, and we don't want those labels. I want to keep them plain, so I'm going to close that and just keep scrolling until I find a white dial that suits my fancy. 29 millimeter dial fits the 2824. No, that one doesn't. There we go, 2824. There we go. This one might look good. Let's go and select the dial that we want. Again, you've got choices. You can see some of them are luminescent. You can see sometimes you'll get dials with multiple feet position, which is good in case you haven't determined which movement you're going to use, because then you can cut these to the specific movement you're going to use without having to solder or have them laser welded. Now I'm just going to scroll down till we find the white one because I'm going to use white. So we have white with gold. We have white with gold in print. And that looks like it. I don't want gold, I want silver. So let's go back to the drawing board. And again, we're just going to keep looking. Here we go. 28.5 millimeter. This will fit fine. We know the case will take 28 to 29.2. And let's go pick a dial. That one looks good. So we've got silver accents, a luminescent dial, and it does have some printing here, which kind of takes, you know, it gives an interest to the dial. If you wanted to put a logo up here, you can do that. And I think in the previous version of this, with the first time I did a video on making your own watch, I did show you how to do that. And I'll put a link in the description box below. So this is probably the dial that I'm going to use. So now I want white, and I want, let's see, 2824. So I'd select that. And that is $13.52 free shipping. And that is coming from China. So that's going to take about 4 weeks. And you go ahead and buy that. Now, once you've determined that, we can go back and say, now we want to look for hands. Now, you're going to want to look for hands for the 2824 movement because obviously that's the movement I'm using. So do that, 2824, watch hands. And now that'll bring up the complete styles. Now, I'm going with a black watch. Now, I didn't purchase my hands on eBay. I purchased them from a supplier, a wholesaler that I do business with. I could have purchased them on eBay and got them, you know, probably in a few weeks. So here's a set. Let's take a look at these. We know this is for the 2824, several other watches that use the same size. If you don't know the sizes, you can go back and look at the model of watch movement you're using and go find the specifics for that particular movement, and it will give you the 3 hand sizes. So if I want to, for instance, if I were going to do this, let's close this window up. I would probably go for this set of hands. The hands I used in this video are going to be a little thinner, a lot more subdued. subdued, and it just makes for a cleaner look, but I think I would have preferred to have gone with these in the first place. I just couldn't find these from my supplier. So a set of hands is going to be $9.03. It's going to be free shipping from China, and again, it's going to take, well, they're saying up to August 5th, and at the time I'm recording this is today, Sunday the 17th or 18th, and Sunday the 17th of July. So you could go ahead and do that. And get them in a couple weeks. I've noticed for me in Florida, it does take about 3 to 4 weeks. So there's your hands. Now you've got the hands, the dial, the movement, and the case. The next thing is to pick a band that you want. So now you have to know, again, with the case that you used. So we come back over here, and let's just go back to the cases. And we picked the 40 millimeter case. Let's scroll down, see if we can find that again. Here we go. So we picked a particular movement. We did this black one here. I'm just going to scroll down to that black one. Find that one. Doesn't really matter which because they're all the same case, just different bezels. And we don't have to worry about that. Let's go take a look at the specifics. This should tell us the band size. So let's see. The case back, crown, rubber seals, and 2 spring bars are included. And let's see here, 20 millimeters. So the lug size for this is 20 millimeters. So we're gonna go search for a 20 millimeter watch band. Now, if you're gonna use leather, you can pick those up here or on Amazon, anywhere else you want to go. I tend to use the silicone band. So if you like those, silicone watch band, black, and let's see what comes up. I don't know if we'll find the exact same one I used. Let's see here, sports band. So let's take a look at these. What are these for? Oh, this is for Apple Watch. We don't want that. Let's see, 20. Let's just do a search for 20 millimeter. We'll narrow this down. 20 millimeter. And I'm not sure why we just get all this stuff for smartwatches, but that seems to be it. Apple Watches. Looking for a generic. Well, you get the idea. So you can go look. Here's smartwatches. That seems to be the biggest push on eBay right now. But you know what to look for. You can go find it there. Let's say we wanted a 20 millimeter stainless watch band, and let's see, you've got a variety of them here. Oops, let's close that. Here's one nice curved end, 18 to 24 millimeters. So you're going to pick your color, you're going to pick your size. We want 20 millimeters. And this is an open link, so the end caps are open. I tend to go with the closed links, tend to be a little more expensive, but a little heavier. So if you like that bulky feel, you can get that. This is just one option that you have available. And let's see, that's an open link. I like the curved ends also because the curved ends kind of conform to the sides of the watch. So anytime I make a watch either for myself or somebody else, I tend to go with the curved end caps on those. And I'm just looking for them. Well, we're not finding them. But you get the hint. Okay, so that's how you go and find your band. So once you've ordered all your parts, you're just going to wait for them to come in and get ready to do the assembly. So that's how I do it. Again, when you pick your watch movement, you pick the case that's going to fit, you pick the dial, the hands, order everything, the band. If it comes with a band, sometimes you get lucky and you get everything all at once. Once you got it all set, you're going to go ahead and we're going to follow the next steps, which is assembling the watch. Let's get going on that. So chances are I went a little too long on the finding your parts section of this video, and I apologize, but I just thought I'd walk you through it. A lot of you guys are new, and if you want a step-by-step walkthrough of how to get your parts, that's kind of important. So here I'm just kind of laying out all my parts and organizing them, and the reason I do that is because I'm going to use these in specific order, and the things I don't need right away are the things I'm going to put aside, move them out of my workspace area, and just get started with the movement part of the watch. So one of the first things I'm going to do is put the crown on the stem. The stem comes with the watch movement. The crown does come with the case 99.9% of the time. I'm going to put the stem and crown together and just make sure that that crown works perfectly. It is a waterproof crown, so it's got a pusher spring in it, and that will help it seal in the watch. I'm actually going to put the watch stem in the watch movement so that I can do testing, and that's very important. And once that stem is seated correctly, I'm going to test the functions of the watch, which would include setting the time, changing the date, and manually forwarding the time so that the watch movement itself actuates the date change at midnight. You want to do this before you continue assembling the watch, because if there's a problem with your watch movement, you want to find that now. From this point, I'm actually going to get ready to insert the dial. Now, on this particular watch movement, the hour hand and the dial washer are usually detached, so you have to put those on. You can see the little tabs here that lock the dial onto the watch movement, and that is a typical ETA feature. So you're going to pull those tabs out, those little rings, and you're going to make sure that your dial fits the watch movement. It should if you ordered the correct dial, or if you have to cut certain feet off, if you have optional extended feet, or you might have like 4, 5, 6 different dial feet on your dial. Just cut off the ones you don't need, and then gently seat the spacer ring on before you do that. So there are 2 little holes where the dial feet will go through on and clamp onto those 2 little locking tabs that we pulled out. You're going to make sure that that dial spacer fits onto the watch movement correctly and allows you to poke the dial feet through those holes and then lock them into place. Now, it's always a good idea to check the spacing of the dial spacer and the elevation of the date ring so that there's no interference. The purpose of that spacer is basically to keep the dial off the date ring, not to cause any friction, and allow the watch to move correctly. So we've got one hole over here, and we've got another hole on the other side, and we're going to put the dial through that. Of course, when handling the dial of your watch, you want to use gloves or finger condoms, whatever you're going to use to work on the watch. You don't want to get fingerprints or debris on the dial, because once it's marked up, you're never going to get those marks off very easily. Now, depending on the dial that you have, you may have to adjust the angle of the dial foot to fit in the hole, and that's what I'm doing here. I'm just going to angle it, push it over very gently. Squeeze that dial onto the movement and make sure that it's seated correctly. Sometimes you have to snap those down a little bit farther. Once that's done, you can use those 2 little tabs on either side of the watch movement to lock the dial in place onto the movement, which is what I'm doing here. So I'm going to push in that tab, and that's going to actuate the locking or clamping of the dial foot to the watch movement. And again, on the ETA movements, there are 2 usually. Some cheaper movements will have screws in the side, so just depends on the movement you use. Always look at the movement, test fit, make sure everything fits perfect, and you can move on from there. With most of these watch movements, they do come timed relatively well. This one was a little bit on the fast side, just a couple seconds a day fast. If you don't have a watch timing machine, no big deal. You know, you can time your own watch if you have the machine. If you don't, you can just kind of run it and test it and make little adjustments on the micro adjuster on the inside of the watch movement. And I will show you how to do that in a little bit ahead in this video. But I like to put the dial on and then test the timing of the watch. You don't have to put the dial on if you don't want to, but I like to have the hour wheel in place just in case there's any friction somewhere on the watch. So here you can see I was testing it in the face up, and now I'm testing it in the face down position. And I will take a look and see how well the watch is working, if it's plus or minus. This is a clone watch. My experience with the brass clone watches is if you get them plus or minus 5 seconds a day, you're doing pretty good. If you get the steel versions of these watches, you'll probably get them down to plus or minus 1 or 2 seconds a day, and that's a little better. And the heat and humidity, depending on where you live, will affect the watch a lot less on a steel movement. Most of these watches do come in relatively timed well. If you do have to make any changes, I suggest limiting yourself to the micro screw adjustment on the back here that's on the balance cock. And you can see I'm just using a flat blade screwdriver, and I'm going to turn that to the fast or slow position depending on what I need to do to make my adjustment, just a little bit at a time. You can probably get yourself anywhere between 5 and 30 seconds of adjustment on most of these watches. So you don't have to make any major adjustments by removing the winding system and going in there and adjusting the beat and location of the balance cock holder. So try not to get involved with that if this is your first time doing it, and just test the watch. If you need to make any changes now or in the future, this little micro screw will help you do that. And again, the way I do it is once I'm done timing the watch, then it's time to make sure the watch is set to the midnight position. And that's what I'm doing here. I'm going to advance the time in the time setting position, which is the second pull out or second click of the pull stem. And I'm going to advance the time until the date advances to the next day. Once I do that, I will stop. Now this watch does have a hack on it, so when you pull the stem out to the second click, it is not running. I've just changed the date over from the 14th to the 15th, and we know it is set in the midnight position. Now I can go ahead and put the hour and minute hand on. So I'm putting the hour hand on. We're going to put that in place. We're going to use our hand push tool and push that down onto the movement very gently. Don't push very hard, especially if you're using a pad here. You can damage the watch. You don't want to especially cause any damage to the pinion for the second hand. So you're just going to kind of push it down and wiggle it around. Make sure that there's no interference between the hand or any of the dial indicators. The dial indicators are those little parts that protrude from the face of the dial. In this case with the non-luminescent little decorative beads there. And what I want to do once I've done that is just make sure that the spacing of the hour hand is not going to interfere with any of those protruding indicators. Once I've done that, I'll go on to the minute hand and set the minute hand in place. If I have to make any adjustments, this is the time to make them. You can gently lift up on one side of the hand or push it down very carefully. I would recommend using your hand tool to do that rather than a screwdriver like I did, but you'll get used to using tools as you do this and move along. Of course, once you're satisfied with the placement of the hour hand, now you can put the minute hand on. Again, this watch is set to the midnight position, so I'm hoping that I've got this close. And we will kind of just push this very gently down and line it up with the hour hand so that we're pointing at midnight. Again, you're going to check the height of the minute hand. If it's too low or touching any of the indicators, you're going to make some adjustments. I kind of turn the watch sideways and I kind of look at it just to make sure that there's enough spacing between the indicator and the minute hand as well as the hour hand and the minute hand. If those two are touching, your watch is going to run erratically. Your hands should never touch each other, nor should they touch any of the indicators on the dial. Now, after looking at this on the side perspective, I did notice that the hour hand was touching the indicator. So what I'm going to do now is using my screwdriver to lift it up, but I decided not to do that because I don't want to scratch the indicator. So I'm going to use my watch hand tool here and just kind of angle up the minute hand until it gets seated nice and parallel to the dial. And again, we have freedom between the hand, the indicators, and the hour hand. And once that's done, I'm just going to rotate the hands around. Sometimes I'll go a whole 24-hour advancement to see if everything works, what position the date ring is in, and make sure that it's snapping when the minute hand gets to the midnight position. And here, very gently, I'm going to now remove the stem and crown from the movement because I'm done testing the watch. It's time to advance to the next part of assembly. Now we'll take the second hand that I ordered from my supplier and I will actually set the second hand onto the watch. When you remove the stem and crown, the watch should be in the running position. So the crown should be pushed all the way in so that the watch will run. That way it's easier to get the stem and crown out without dislodging any of the clutch parts. You can then set your second hand, and if you do that very carefully, do not push hard. That pin will break, and it's not worth buying the part to replace it. Might as well just buy a new movement at that point. So you want to see if your watch works. If it's working good, you are in good shape. At this point, I'm going ahead and I'm going to seat the movement into the watch case. I'm going to rotate it around so that the hole for the stem and crown meets the case tube on the right side of the watch. Once that's done, now I can go ahead and put the spacer ring in just to make sure that everything fits good and that there's no interference with the rotor. You want to make sure, depending on the spacer ring you have, that there's no interference with the automatic winding system because some of them will come in manufactured poorly and you may have to make adjustments now and then. Now these are the case clamps, and you're going to actually under most conditions, bend those or adjust those to fit the case. These clamps will hold the watch in place inside the case so that it doesn't rattle or shake or move. The purpose of the ring is to keep it moving laterally. The purpose of these clamps is to keep it moving vertically. So you want to make sure that they are tightened. In this case, on this particular watch movement, with these particular clamps, I had to adjust the angle. So I'm taking some flat nose pliers and I'm just going to bend those so that they'll fit much more tighter onto the watch movement, holding it well within the case. Normally on your watch, you'll have two clamps and you're going to have to make the same adjustment to both clamps. Now these pieces will bend a little easier, so once you get them in the watch, when you tighten down the screws, they'll kind of adjust themselves and hold the watch in place. Now, since my case clamps are adjusted, I'm going to throw on the crown and stem just to make sure that the watch is held in position the correct way while I'm working on it, and that it doesn't move or rotate in the case, which would cause me an angle alignment in the future. So I just like to reset the stem and crown in there one more time, and then I can make any adjustments. So here we go. We're going to just make sure everything's working perfectly, that the crown is in position. I can set it to the first or second click, make timing adjustments, make sure that the date thing works, and then I can set the case clamps from there. So different watches will have different styles of clamping. This is the way that this particular movement clamps onto this particular case. So in this instance, we take those little adjusted balance clamps and we're going to align them into a little slot that resides in the watch case itself. And I'm going to very, very carefully put the case screw or the clamping screw onto the watch movement so that it holds down the clamp, and I'm going to thread it, not all the way down, but I'm going to screw that down so that it gives me a little lateral movement, but it holds the movement in place just enough so that I don't have to have the watch spin around while I'm working on it. You can see in this instance, the rotor doesn't spin, so you're going to have to tighten that screw up just a little bit if you did what I did. Again, you don't want to go all the way down just yet. You just want to make sure that you get it held in place. Now we'll go to the next clamp and we'll put that on. Again, this is going to fit into the little slot within the case itself. And the screw that we're going to use will hold down that clamp and tighten it up against the watch case. So with the second clamp in place, lightly screwed down, again, just a little bit on the loose side, I'm going to go ahead and make any adjustments to the spacer ring that I need to make. I'm going to make that lined up a little bit better so that my stem is in the middle of that spacing ring. That's just good practice. It'll cause less friction with the stem and crown while you're working on it. If the crown or stem is rubbing against that spacer ring, it's going to wear it down and break it over time. Once that's done, I'm going to go ahead and tighten up my case clamps. Okay, so at this point, what I want to do now is just finalize the setting for the stem and crown. I've already cut the crown to fit, so I'm going to remove the stem and crown from the watch movement. Again, push it in all the way to the winding position, then remove it with the stem release on the clutch. And what I'm going to do now is put a little bit of Loctite on the stem and crown so that it holds together. In this particular case, the rubber washer came off the case, so I'm going to reinsert it into the case tube and just make sure that it's in there good and it's not going to have any friction from the case or the crown spinning on it. You will find that these gaskets are a little bit on the tight side, and that's okay because they will kind of conform themselves to daily use of the watch over a period of time. The first couple of weeks or months that you use the watch, you're going to find that it's a little bit hard to wind and set the time until that gasket kind of conforms itself to the curvature of the crown. Once that's in, I'm going to go ahead and do a test one more time, make sure that the watch sets and runs again good. So with the watch running good, and again, I tested the time, made sure everything was good, I'm going to put the back gasket on the case back and get that seated correctly. These will give you a little bit of a hard time. These inexpensive movements have good fit and finish, but every once in a while I do find that the gaskets kind of come out when I try to put the cover back on. So you're just going to play around until you get it to seat right. Once it seats right, tighten it down, clamp it down. Don't clamp it too tightly. If you squish that grommet or that gasket too much, you're actually going to ruin the seal of the watch. So keep that in mind. A lot of people, and I'm not sure why, when I get watches in for service once in a while, people tighten these things down to the point where you think that it was done with an air hammer or something. It's just crazy. So you have to be conscious of the fact that that rubber gasket is there to provide a water seal, and it does not have to be clamped down so tightly that you can never get it off. You actually can damage the threads of the case back as well as the inner threads of the case. So we've made our custom watch. That's pretty cool. Now this is the watch in its final version. You can see that the hands, I used a set of relatively thin hands here. Again, I was going for a kind of a clean look. I didn't want anything too busy. The dial doesn't have a logo on it yet. Again, I'm going to give this watch to a friend of mine, so I want to find out what he would like on it. I think he wants something personal. He's going to want on there, so I'll wait until he makes the decision. Again, I can just remove the dial, put the logo on, and go from there. So you're done with the watch assembly if you've gotten to this point. Now it's a good time to just make sure that it sets and winds one more time and that there's no issues. Here I'm just checking the crown, make sure that I can tighten it down all the way. It's a little tough to do with these gloves on. I apologize for the shaking. I've got the watch really close up to the camera and kind of zoomed in here. This watch does have a rotating bezel. It rotates in both directions, which is not something I'm a big fan of. But again, these inexpensive cases, while they do work pretty well, they don't have a locking bezel. So you just have to remember that they'll spin in both directions. Everything looks pretty good, and it's time to put the band on. And again, I tend to use these divers bands. I like them. I've been using them for years, and luckily I haven't had to replace any. They hold up well to diving and everyday use, and you can clean them. So that's probably the most important reason why I use them, is because they do hold up to water, so it's just like pools, oceans, beaches. The cases hold up pretty well. As long as you're not diving past like 90 feet, I think you should be pretty good with these inexpensive cases. Let's get this band on. Just remember when you're assembling your own custom watch, I always think it looks better to have a curved end on a watch band. It just makes the watch look much more professionally made. I think sometimes people come in with those flat end caps on their watch bands with a curved case. They just tend to look a little bit on the cheap side. Tends to be the one reason I use the curved end caps on all the bands I use. You guys know how to put these bands on. I'm not going to teach you anything new. You're just going to get it and snap it in place. Once it's snapped in place and you feel it locked in, you can go on to the next part of the watch band and put that in. Again, a lot of people like the stainless steel bands. You can get those typically from the same people you'll buy the watch cases from. If you look long enough and hard enough, you'll find most of these sellers actually have other listings where they sell not just the cases, but they'll sell the case with the watch band. A lot of times, instead of $35 or $45, you'll end up paying like $60 or $80 for the whole watch setup, but you do get the band that matches the case. So something to think about. And here we go. This is the completed watch. It looks pretty good. I got to wipe off all my fingerprints. Would suggest you do that too when you put your watch together. Make sure it's nice and clean. If you're going to give it away or sell it to somebody, however you're going to do it. If it's your watch, hey, put it on and enjoy it. This watch actually came out pretty good. Again, it does have something missing from the dial. I think you'll all let me know in the comments what you think. But I do like the clean look. I like the fact that it's easy to read. Especially because I'm down here in Florida in the summertime, it's the contrast between the black hands and the white dial just make a whole lot easier watch to read. Hey, if you made it to this part of the video, I really appreciate it. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. Anytime you give my videos a thumbs up, if you really like them, it does help my channel get a little bit more exposure on YouTube, and I do appreciate it. If you're not a subscriber and would like to see other videos like this, hit that subscribe button, and then anytime I post a video, it should show up in your YouTube subscriptions. And if you want to get notified when I upload a video, just hit the little notification bell, and you will get a notification the next time I upload a video. Thanks for watching, guys. I really hope you enjoyed this video. If you have any questions, leave them in the comment section below, and I will do my best to read and respond to as many as I can. Thanks again, and have a great day.